A karate coach harasses a single mother at a dojo, publicly humiliating her and her shy 12-year-old son while demanding outrageous fees she can't afford. The arrogant instructor grabs the desperate mother's wrist, leaving bruises as he blocks their exit and mocks her for raising a boy alone. But the quiet janitor mopping floors in the corner isn't just another employee. This is Donnie Yen himself. The bully has no idea he just assaulted a woman in front of a man who's mastered Wing Chun for 4 decades and destroyed villains across 50 action films. While the coach threatens to humiliate the boy in front of other parents, the legendary martial artist steps forward with that signature calm that has terrified enemies for generations. The mother recognizes her savior and pulls her son close, knowing this predator is about to face true justice. The instructor's students keep watching, thinking they're about to see their master dominate another victim, but they're actually witnessing the moment their hero becomes someone's nightmare. What happens when you pick on the wrong family in front of the wrong janitor? Will the coach survive learning why some legends clean up more than just floors? What happened next would shatter the bully's arrogance forever. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Linda Brennan stood outside Kellerman's elite martial arts academy at 6:30 p.m. on a Tuesday evening, her fingers wrapped around a crumpled flyer she'd found taped to Tommy's locker at school. The humid Phoenix air pressed against her diner uniform as she checked her phone one more time. $247 in her checking account. Not much, but maybe enough for hope. Her beat-up Honda Civic idled in the parking lot, the engine's tired wheeze a reminder of how close everything was to falling apart. Through the academy's floor-to-ceiling windows, she watched teenagers in crisp, white uniforms executing kicks with precision and power. Their confident movements made her chest tighten with longing for her son. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Tommy's voice was barely above a whisper. At 12, he was small for his age, with dark hair that fell across green eyes that held too much worry for a child. 3 incidents this semester: shoved into lockers, tripped in hallways, his lunch money stolen by Kyle Brenner and his crew. The principal's nephew, untouchable and vicious. "We're going to try, baby." Linda smoothed his hair, her waitress calloused hands gentle against his cheek. Everyone deserves to feel strong. The dojo's interior was impressive, mirrored walls reflecting rows of trophies, professional equipment arranged with military precision. A heavy-set woman in her 50s looked up from the reception desk, her smile warm but practiced. "You must be the Brennans. I'm Brenda Kowalski." She gestured toward the viewing area where parents sat watching their children train. "Master Kellerman likes to personally evaluate all new students." Linda's heart sank as Brenda explained the costs. $180. Monthly tuition, plus $85 for required equipment, plus additional fees for testing and tournaments. She did quick math, more than her grocery budget, nearly half her rent. But Tommy's face was pressed against the glass, watching a class with desperate hunger. "We have payment plans," Brenda added gently, recognizing the conflict in Linda's expression. As they scheduled Tommy's trial class for Thursday evening, Linda noticed movement in her peripheral vision. An older Asian man in maintenance coveralls was methodically mopping near the trophy case, his movements somehow more fluid than they should be for simple janitorial work. When he glanced up, his eyes met Tommy's through the glass, and he gave the boy a subtle, encouraging nod before returning to his task. Something about that moment, the quiet dignity in the man's bearing, the way he moved with perfect balance even while cleaning, stayed with Linda as they walked back to their car. Thursday evening arrived gray and oppressive, typical for late September in Phoenix. Linda rushed straight from her afternoon shift at Murphy's Diner, still wearing her uniform with a cardigan thrown over the grease stains. They arrived at 6:45, 15 minutes early because Linda never wanted to be the parent who disrupted class. The dojo buzzed with activity. Advanced students stretched and practiced forms while younger children worked on basic techniques under the supervision of junior instructors. Tommy pressed close to Linda's side, his nervousness palpable as they watched through the viewing areas. "Windows. Impressive, isn't it?" The voice belonged to Marcus Kellerman, and it commanded immediate attention. At 45, he was exactly what Linda had expected from a martial arts master, stocky and powerful, with graying temples, and the bearing of absolute authority. His expensive GI bore multiple black belt degrees, and when he moved, it was with the controlled violence of a professional fighter. Tommy Brennan? Kellerman's pale eyes assessed the boy like a judge evaluating livestock. Small frame, but that can be worked with. What's your background in martial arts, son? None, sir. Tommy's voice cracked slightly. Kellerman's smile didn't reach his eyes. I see. And where's Dad tonight? Linda felt heat rise in her cheeks. It's just us. I'm a single mother. Ah, Kellerman nodded as if this explained everything. That's challenging. Boys need strong discipline, especially from father figures. Martial arts can provide some of that structure that's missing at home. The comment stung, but Linda forced herself to stay quiet. She needed this for Tommy. During introductions, Kellerman asked probing questions about Linda's work schedule, their living situation, Tommy's school performance. Each question felt like an evaluation of their worthiness, delivered with the polished charm of someone used to getting what he wanted. Single mothers often struggle to provide the kind of discipline boys need to become men, he said, loud enough for other parents to hear. It requires commitment some families simply can't sustain. Near the windows, the maintenance worker continued his cleaning. Danny, Brenda had called him earlier. His movements were economical and precise as he reached for supplies, and when Kellerman demonstrated a basic stance that was slightly off-center, Linda noticed Danny unconsciously correct his own posture while appearing to focus on his work. When Tommy attempted his first form, stumbling through the movements with painful uncertainty, Kellerman's critique was sharp. Sloppy footwork, no power in the strikes. We'll need to rebuild everything from scratch. But Danny had positioned himself where Tommy could see him in the mirror's reflection, and his subtle demonstration of proper form, disguised as reaching for cleaning equipment, helped Tommy adjust his stance immediately. Monday evening brought Tommy's first official class, and Linda watched from the viewing area still wearing her Murphy's Diner uniform. The smell of French fry oil clung to her hair despite the quick shower she'd managed between shifts. Around her, other parents sat in comfortable athletic wear, checking phones and making small talk about their children's progress. Danny was there. Again, methodically cleaning the same section of mirror for the third time, clearly positioning himself to observe the class. His attention seemed focused on Tommy, though he was careful not to make it obvious. Brennan, Kellerman's voice cracked like a whip across the training floor. Are you here to learn or waste everyone's time? Tommy had hesitated during a sparring drill, facing off against Marcus Wilson, a boy who had 40 pounds and 2 years of training on him. The mismatch was deliberate. Linda could see it in Kellerman's calculating expression as he watched Tommy struggle to defend himself. In the real world, nobody cares about fair fights, Kellerman announced to the class. You get what you get, and you deal with it like a man. Marcus Wilson followed his instructor's lead, treating Tommy like a practice dummy. When Tommy stumbled backward from a particularly hard shove, several students snickered. Kyle Brenner, attending the advanced class in the next room, deliberately walked past during the water break and, accidentally, bumped into Tommy, spilling water across his GI. Clumsy. Kyle smirked, loud enough for others to hear. Linda's hands clenched in her lap. Every instinct screamed at her to intervene, but Kellerman had made it clear that parental interference wasn't tolerated. This was about making Tommy tough, he'd said, building character, but Danny saw everything. When Tommy's eyes filled with tears of frustration and embarrassment, the maintenance worker caught the boy's gaze in the mirror's reflection. Without breaking his cleaning rhythm, he demonstrated a subtle breathing technique, slow, controlled exhales that helped center the mind. Tommy followed along, his breathing gradually steadying, his shoulders straightening with new resolve. Better, Kellerman grudgingly admitted when Tommy managed to complete the next drill without falling. Still pathetic, but slightly less so. After class, as Linda waited for Tommy to change out of his damp GI, she found herself studying Danny more carefully. His movements while cleaning showed perfect balance and control. When he thought no one was watching, she caught glimpses of shadow boxing between his regular duties, precise, flowing movements that spoke of decades of training. Tommy approached Danny hesitantly as they prepared to leave. Are you a martial artist too? Danny's smile was gentle and knowing. I've been studying for a long time. The best warriors are often the ones who clean up after battles. The words carried weight that Linda didn't fully understand. But something in Danny's quiet dignity gave her hope that maybe, just maybe, Tommy would find what he was looking for here. 2 weeks later, Linda sat across from Kellerman's imposing desk, her hands folded tightly in her lap to hide their trembling. The office was a shrine to his ego, walls covered with photos of him competing, magazine covers featuring his victories, championship belts displayed like hunting trophies. She'd been called in for Tommy's progress evaluation, though she'd worked a double shift and felt ready to collapse. "Mrs. Brennan, we need to discuss Tommy's development." Kellerman's voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. Behind him, Danny emptied wastebaskets with quiet efficiency, close enough to overhear but invisible to the man behind the desk. Kellerman opened a folder thick with charts and assessments. "Tommy shows potential, but he has significant deficiencies that stem from his home environment. Boys without strong father figures often lack the killer instinct necessary for martial arts excellence." Each word was carefully chosen to wound. Linda felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger, but she forced herself to listen. "I'm recommending Tommy for our champion track program, an additional $120 monthly, plus private lessons at $75 each. It's the only way to overcome the disadvantages he's facing." The papers he slid across the desk showed Tommy ranking dead last in every category: strength, technique, discipline, focus, red marks and failing grades across the board. Linda's vision blurred as she read the devastating assessment of her son's abilities. "I can barely afford what we're paying now," she whispered. "I'm working 16-hour days already." "Then perhaps martial arts isn't for your family." Kellerman's shrug was perfectly calibrated to increase her desperation. "Mediocre training produces mediocre men. Is that what you want for Tommy?" Behind him, Danny had paused in his cleaning, and Linda caught his eye in the reflection of a framed certificate. Something in his steady gaze steadied her racing heart. "There's a payment plan," Kellerman continued, producing new contracts. "Only $265 monthly, spread over 18 months. Think of it as investing in Tommy's future and your peace of mind." The contract was dense with fine print, but Linda's exhaustion made the words swim together. Hidden fees, interest, charges, penalties for early withdrawal, financial quicksand disguised as opportunity. "Boys need to see their mothers fight for them," Kellerman pressed. "Will you do whatever it takes to give Tommy the strength he needs?" Linda's hand shook as she reached for the pen. In the mirror's reflection, she saw Danny step closer to the office doorway, his presence somehow reassuring. She paused, forcing herself to read the contract terms more carefully, her maternal instincts warring with Kellerman's psychological pressure. The numbers didn't lie. Signing this would trap them in debt for years. But walking away meant admitting she'd failed Tommy again, leaving him defenseless against bullies who saw his gentleness as weakness. With Danny watching silently from the doorway, Linda made a choice that would change everything. 3 weeks later, parent demonstration night transformed the dojo into a theater of pride and performance. Linda had requested the evening off from her cleaning job, sacrificing $65 in wages she couldn't afford to lose. The viewing area overflowed with families dressed in their weekend best, smartphones ready to capture their children's achievements. Danny worked methodically around the crowd, setting up folding chairs and adjusting lighting with the invisible efficiency of someone accustomed to serving others. His positioning seemed random, but gave him clear sight lines to every corner of the training floor. The demonstration began with advanced students showcasing complex forms and sparring techniques. Parents cheered as teenagers executed spinning kicks and grappling combinations with impressive skill. The energy was infectious. Children laughed, parents applauded, and even Linda found herself momentarily caught up in the excitement. But as the evening progressed and the skill levels decreased, the audience grew restless. Conversations started during the intermediate demonstrations. Phones came out for checking messages rather than recording. By the time Kellerman called up the beginner group, half the parents were discussing dinner plans. "Now let's see how our newest warriors are progressing," Kellerman announced with theatrical flair. "Remember, everyone starts somewhere." The subtle mockery in his tone made Linda's stomach clench. Tommy stood with 5 other beginners, his small frame dwarfed by older, more confident students. His GI hung loose on his shoulders, and she could see the nervous energy radiating from his rigid posture. Tonight, we'll test their development under pressure with real sparring, Kellerman continued. No choreographed demonstrations, actual combat to show what they've learned. Linda shot to her feet. Excuse me, but Tommy's only been training. 4. Parents, please hold your comments until after the demonstration. Kellerman's voice cut through her objection like a blade. Interruptions disrupt the student's focus. Around her, other parents shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. The unspoken rule was clear: Kellerman's domain, Kellerman's rules. Linda sank back into her chair, her heart hammering as she watched him scan the beginners like a predator. Selecting prey, his eyes settled on Tommy with unmistakable intent. Brennan, you'll spar with Morrison. Jake Morrison stepped forward, Detective Ray Morrison's son, 14 years old with 2 years of training and 40 pounds of muscle advantage. The mismatch was so obvious that several parents murmured in concern, but Kellerman was already calling for the match to begin. The sparring match was brutal theater disguised as education. Jake Morrison circled Tommy like a shark, his movements confident and predatory. He'd clearly received private instructions because his attacks were calculated to humiliate rather than simply defeat. Leg sweeps that sent Tommy crashing to the mat, shoulder checks that knocked him backward, controlling holds that left him helpless and gasping. Get up, Brennan. Kellerman's voice echoed through the sudden silence. Real men don't stay down. Tommy struggled to his feet, his GI torn at the shoulder, blood trickling from his nose. The other parents watched in horrified fascination as what should have been a learning demonstration became a one-sided beating. Jake followed up with a takedown that sent Tommy hard to the mat, the impact echoing through the room. This is what happens when boys aren't properly prepared for reality, Kellerman announced to his captive audience. Coddling creates weakness. The world doesn't care about your feelings. When Tommy didn't immediately rise, Linda broke. She stormed onto the training floor, shattering every protocol and social boundary. Stop this right now. This isn't training. This is abuse. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Other parents began murmuring agreement. The spell of authority finally broken. Beverly Martinez whispered to her neighbor, "That poor child." Frank Patterson shook his head in disgust. Kellerman's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing cold fury at this public challenge to his dominance. He approached Linda with barely contained aggression, his presence looming over her as she knelt beside Tommy. Mrs. Brennan, perhaps if you understood martial arts better, you'd know that real preparation requires real challenges. Your son needs to learn what real men face in the real world. His voice carried across the silent dojo, designed to wound and humiliate. Maybe if you'd found a man who could actually provide instead of playing the victim, your son wouldn't be so soft. This is what happens when women try to raise boys alone. You create weaklings. The words hit their target. Linda's face flushed with shame and rage, but before she could respond, Kellerman pressed his advantage. You signed a contract, Mrs. Brennan. Tommy needs this training more than most. When she helped Tommy to his feet and announced they were leaving immediately, his smile turned predatory. I'm afraid that's not possible. He produced her contract with theatrical flourish, pointing to a clause buried in fine print. Withdrawal after the trial period forfeits all fees paid and incurs a $500 early termination penalty. The trap closed with mechanical precision. Linda realized she couldn't afford to leave and couldn't afford to stay. As she tried to process this impossible situation, Kellerman grabbed her wrist to prevent her from helping Tommy stand. We're not done discussing your son's training. His grip tightened, leaving visible marks on her skin. She cried out in pain. As 30 witnesses watched a grown man assault a desperate mother in his own dojo, that's when the quiet voice cut through the tension like a blade. Remove your hands from the lady. Every head turned toward the back of the room where Danny stood perfectly still, a cleaning cloth in his hands. His voice carried quiet authority that seemed to fill the space despite its conversational volume. The transformation was subtle but complete. The invisible maintenance worker had become the focal point of everyone's attention. Kellerman laughed, his grip still tight on Linda's wrist. The janitor wants to play hero? Get back to work, old man. This doesn't concern you. My name, Danny said, walking forward with movements that flowed like water, is Donnie Yen. And you have forgotten what martial arts truly means. Recognition rippled through the crowd. Parents whispered his name with growing excitement and disbelief. Beverly Martinez grabbed her husband's arm. That's really him. From the movies. Tommy looked up from the mat, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time in weeks. Even through his pain and humiliation, he understood that something extraordinary was happening. Kellerman's sneer faltered slightly, but his ego wouldn't allow retreat. I don't care if you're Jackie Chan himself. This is my dojo, and I don't take orders from the help. His free hand moved toward Yen in a threatening gesture, not realizing he was about to make the most catastrophic mistake of his life in front of 30 witnesses. The crowd held its breath as two very different kinds of martial artists faced each other. One who used his skills to exploit, another who'd spent decades perfecting the art of protection. Martial arts, Yen said softly, continuing his approach, is about protecting others, not exploiting them. The technique was surgical in its precision. Using classical Wing Chun trapping, Yen applied pressure to specific points on Kellerman's wrist and elbow simultaneously. The grip on Linda was broken instantly, and Kellerman found himself immobilized in a lock that caused excruciating pain, but left no marks. When you grab someone weaker than yourself, Yen explained calmly while maintaining the hold, you reveal your own weakness. Released and humiliated in front of his students, Kellerman's rage overwhelmed his judgment. His face flushed crimson as he stepped back, rubbing his wrist and glaring at the quiet man who'd just made him look like an amateur. You want to show off for these people? Kellerman snarled. Fine. Let's see what Hollywood Kung Fu does against real fighting. The formal challenge hung in the air as the crowd buzzed with anticipation. They were about to witness something unprecedented, a legendary action star in actual combat. That Yen's response was measured and calm. I accept on one condition. When I win, Mrs. Brennan receives a full refund, and you apologize to her and Tommy publicly. Kellerman's confidence was absolute. He outweighed Yen by 40 pounds and had 15 years of competitive experience. Deal. When I'm done with you, maybe these people will remember who runs this place. The formal sparring began with both men bowing respectfully, but Kellerman's bow was perfunctory, his mind already focused on the violence to come. He stripped to his fighting GI, revealing an impressive physique covered in competition scars and tattoos that marked his semi-professional career. Yen simply removed his maintenance coveralls, revealing a simple black t-shirt and pants. At 61, he appeared smaller and older than his opponent, leading some parents to worry about his safety. But Tommy, watching from Linda's arms, whispered, "Look how he moves, Mom. He's like water." Kellerman's opening assault was designed to end the fight quickly, a charging combination of heavy punches and kicks that would overwhelm most opponents through sheer force. For 30 seconds, it seemed like it might work, backing Yen toward the wall with aggressive combinations that demonstrated real skill and power, but Yen's defense was poetry in motion. Using Wing Chun's centerline theory, he deflected rather than blocked, redirecting Kellerman's power while remaining perfectly balanced. Each attack missed by inches as Yen flowed around the violence like water around a stone. As Kellerman's combinations became more wild and desperate, Yen began his counteroffensive. Quick strikes to nerve clusters and pressure points gradually slowed his opponent's movements. Each technique was explained as he executed it, turning combat into education. This is called sticky hands, Yen said softly, trapping Kellerman's wrists and controlling his next move. I maintain contact to feel your intentions. The systematic breakdown was a masterclass in classical martial arts. Yen demonstrated trapping, simultaneous attack and defense, an economy of motion while Kellerman, exhausted himself against superior technique. The watching parents and students witnessed the difference between fighting and artistry. Kellerman's desperate takedown attempt became his downfall. Yen used the momentum against him, executing a perfect throw that sent the larger man crashing to the mat. The submission hold that followed could have broken Kellerman's arm, but instead demonstrated complete control. Yield, Yen said quietly. Defeated and held immobile, Kellerman tapped out and grudgingly fulfilled his agreement. His apology to Linda and Tommy was brief but public, witnessed by everyone who'd seen the original humiliation. As the crowd dispersed and Linda gratefully accepted her refund, Kellerman retreated to his office and made a phone call. Through the window, Yin noticed black SUVs pulling into the parking lot. Kellerman emerged with a sinister smile, flanked by men in expensive suits. You have no idea who you're messing with, old man. This dojo has protection you can't imagine. The real fight was just beginning. The tension shattered when Detective Ray Morrison burst through the dojo's entrance with two federal agents flanking him. Agent Patricia Volkov, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s, and Agent Michael Torres from the Financial Crimes Task Force moved with practiced efficiency, their badges gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Morrison looked haggard, his 20-year veteran's face etched with exhaustion and guilt. He'd been sitting in his patrol car outside the dojo for hours, wrestling with knowledge that had been eating him alive for months. Federal investigation, Agent Volkov announced, her voice cutting through the confused murmurs of lingering parents. Nobody leaves until we sort this out. The men from the black SUVs immediately tensed, hands moving toward concealed weapons, but Torres's calm gesture stopped them. Gentlemen, I'd suggest keeping your hands visible. We know exactly who you are. Volkov addressed the crowd of families, her tone professional but reassuring. We've been building a case against this facility for 6 months. What you witnessed tonight was the tip of a very dangerous iceberg. She explained the Kozlov operation with clinical precision: money laundering through fraudulent martial arts contracts, underground fighting rings using coerced minors, and a network spanning 3 states. Kellerman's dojo was one of 17 fronts used to identify vulnerable families and trap them in escalating debt. The contracts are deliberately predatory, Torres added, producing evidence files. Families are targeted through their children's programs, then systematically exploited until their teenagers are fighting grown men for money. Yin listened with growing understanding. His maintenance job hadn't been coincidental. The Kozlovs had been watching him since his arrival in Phoenix 2 months ago for a film project, planning to eventually recruit him as either a trainer or featured attraction. Morrison stepped forward, his voice cracking with emotion. My son Jake has been fighting for 3 months. I've been feeding them information to keep him safe, but tonight, he looked at the boy with desperate love. Tonight, I realized I was protecting the wrong people. Viktor Kozlov himself emerged from the lead SUV, tall, lean, with steel-gray hair and the cold calculation of a former intelligence officer. His presence transformed the parking lot into a crime scene. Detective Morrison has been very helpful, Kozlov said in accented English. Unfortunately, tonight's theatrics have complicated our arrangement considerably. Agent Volkov's radio crackled with urgent updates. 3 families connected to their investigation, including Rosa Martinez and her son Diego, had been reported missing since the afternoon. Their houses showed signs of hasty departure, but neighbors had seen black SUVs in the area. Kozlov was eliminating witnesses before they could testify. The Phoenix FBI field office at 11:30 p.m. felt like a war room. Under siege. Yen, Linda, Tommy, and Detective Morrison huddled around a conference table covered with case files that painted a horrifying picture of systematic exploitation spanning multiple states. Agent Volkov spread photographs across the table, 17 martial arts schools, all running variations of the same scheme. Financial records showed millions in laundered money flowing through legitimate-looking businesses that preyed on families' love for their children. The Martinez family was our key witness, Torres explained, his voice tight with professional frustration. Rosa and her son Diego had agreed to testify about the underground fights. Diego's been fighting for 6 months, earning $200 per match, while the family owed over $3,000 in manufactured fees. The recruitment pattern was devastatingly simple. Kellerman specifically targeted single mothers and struggling families, using psychological manipulation to create debt that couldn't be repaid through normal means. Children were assessed during evaluations for fighting potential, with the most promising candidates subjected to increasingly abusive training designed to break their spirit and make them compliant. The Patterson family lost their home trying to pay artificially inflated training fees, Volkov continued. The Kowalski family's 16-year-old son suffered a serious head injury in an underground fight. Each family thought they were alone until tonight. Morrison's hands shook as he reviewed files containing his son's fight records. Jake's been fighting for 3 months. They told me it was voluntary, that he wanted to help pay off my gambling debts. I believed them because I needed to believe them. Yen studied surveillance photos of the underground operation. Teenagers fighting grown men, while wealthy spectators placed enormous bets on the violence. The medical attention was minimal. Children were treated as disposable entertainment for criminals laundering drug money. Your maintenance job wasn't random, Torres told Yen. They've been planning to recruit you since your arrival. Initially as a trainer for their fighters, but after tonight's performance, probably as a featured attraction in high-stakes matches. The scope of corruption was staggering. Kozlov had video evidence of Morrison's crimes, financial records of payoffs to other officials, and compromising material on judges and prosecutors. Even if tonight's operation failed, the criminal network had tentacles throughout law enforcement and the justice system. Agent Volkov's secure phone buzzed with confirmation that made everyone's blood run cold. The missing families were being held at a warehouse complex outside the city, the same location where underground fights were staged every weekend. Intelligence suggests they'll be moved before dawn, Torres said grimly. Possibly out of state. Possibly worse. Morrison estimates they had less than 6 hours before the families disappeared permanently. The safe house in Scottsdale felt like a bunker under siege. At 1:15 a.m., Yin met with the families who'd managed to escape Kozlov's roundup. Linda and Tommy, Frank Patterson with his trembling hands, Beverly Martinez desperately clutching a photo of her missing grandson Diego, and Detective Morrison with Jake, whose young face showed the trauma of months in underground fights. The sharing circle that formed naturally revealed the full psychological devastation of Kozlov's operation. Each family had been isolated, manipulated into believing their situation was unique, and systematically broken down until resistance seemed impossible. They made me feel like I was failing Jake, Morrison whispered, his 20-year police career reduced to ash by his son's frightened eyes. The gambling debts were real, but they made them worse. Every time I fed them information, they forgave a little more debt. I thought I was protecting him. Jake Morrison broke down describing the underground fights. Children as young as 13 forced to battle grown men, while wealthy spectators bet on their suffering. The medical attention was deliberately minimal. Injured fighters were expected to continue until they couldn't stand. Diego's been missing for 6 hours, Beverly Martinez said, her grandmother's strength barely containing her terror. He's only 16. He shouldn't have to be brave anymore. While waiting for federal backup that might arrive too late, Yen began teaching basic self-defense and situational awareness. His approach was gentle but systematic, showing Linda pressure point techniques that could disable an attacker, teaching Tommy and Jake how to break grips and escape holds, demonstrating to Frank how common objects could become defensive tools. Each lesson built confidence while acknowledging their fear. Yen understood that healing required empowerment, not just rescue. The mind is your first weapon, he explained to Tommy, whose small hands were learning to strike with precision rather than desperation. Size doesn't matter if you understand leverage and timing. Agent Volkov outlined the rescue operation plan for dawn when most of Kozlov's security detail would be off duty. However, intelligence suggested the missing families would be moved to a secondary location before then, possibly out of state or into permanent silence. A direct assault violates federal protocol, she admitted. Too many variables, too much risk of civilian casualties. But waiting might mean losing them forever. Yen studied building schematics and satellite photos, his film experience with complex action sequences suggesting possibilities the federal agents hadn't considered. Multiple entry points, systematic threat elimination, coordinated rescue, and containment. I go in first, he proposed. Locate and secure the hostages while you handle perimeter containment and evidence preservation. As they finalized their desperate plan, Morrison's personal phone rang. Viktor Kozlov's accented voice crackled through the speaker with chilling politeness. The movie star caused this problem. Let him fix it with his life. You have 2 hours to decide. The warehouse complex squatted against the Phoenix skyline like a concrete cancer, its abandoned exterior masking the horror within. At 3:45 a.m., Yen studied the facility through binoculars from Agent Torres's surveillance van, thermal imaging revealing significant activity inside the seemingly dead building. The structure was a maze of interconnected spaces, loading docks, storage areas, and a central arena where Kozlov staged his underground entertainment. Guard positions were professional but not military. These men were used to intimidating civilians, not facing actual threats. Yen went in alone through a skylight, using wire-fu techniques adapted from decades of film work to navigate the rafters silently. The skills that had made him a legendary screen fighter now served a darker purpose: infiltration and reconnaissance in a real-world rescue operation. Below him, the underground fighting operation continued in full swing. Wealthy spectators in expensive suits surrounded a makeshift ring where teenagers fought desperately while their families watched in caged horror. The betting was enormous, hundreds of thousands changing hands on each brutal match. Diego Martinez, barely conscious and showing signs of serious head trauma, was being prepared for a match against a man twice his size and age. Rosa pleaded, with Kozlov through the cage bars, offering everything she owned, but he laughed and increased the betting pool on her grandson's destruction. Other children showed evidence of previous fights: broken bones poorly healed, cuts stitched with minimal care, the hollow eyes of young people who'd seen too much violence. They were being treated as disposable entertainment for criminals who bet on human suffering. Yin's presence was detected when a guard noticed disturbed dust falling from the rafters during a particularly violent takedown below. Emergency sirens wailed as the facility went into lockdown mode, steel security doors sealing all exits with mechanical finality. "Kill them all," Kozlov's voice echoed through speakers. No witnesses, no evidence, no problems. The first battle erupted in the rafters as three armed guards converged on Yin's position. The fight showcased his ability to use industrial environments as weapons, swinging from pipes, using tools and equipment as defensive implements, demonstrating the flowing adaptability that had made him a cinema legend. Each opponent fell to different Wing Chun principles adapted to the industrial setting. The first guard was defeated using trapping techniques around a support beam. The second fell to pressure point strikes while hanging from overhead piping. The third was eliminated using environmental hazards, a precisely timed move that sent him into electrical panels. Yen dropped to the main floor to continue his rescue mission. Emergency lighting flooded the warehouse, and Kozlov's voice returned with cold amusement. "Congratulations, Mr. Yen. You've trapped yourself in here with us. Now my fighters get to show you what real violence looks like." 6 professional fighters emerged from the shadows, surrounding him as terrified families watched through cage bars, understanding that their salvation might have just become their executioner. The warehouse floor transformed into a gladiatorial arena with Yen at its center, emergency lighting casting dramatic shadows as 6 professional fighters closed their circle. Kozlov's voice boomed through speakers, narrating the confrontation. For his wealthy spectators who watched from behind bulletproof glass like Romans at the Colosseum. "Ladies and gentlemen, witness the destruction of a Hollywood legend," Kozlov announced with theatrical flair. "Tonight, fantasy meets reality." The first wave attacked simultaneously: a heavyweight boxer, a collegiate wrestler, and a Muay Thai specialist. Their coordination was professional, designed to overwhelm through combined assault rather than individual skill. But Yen had faced multiple opponents in dozens of films, and the principles remained the same: positioning, timing, and using their numbers against them. He flowed between their attacks like water finding gaps in stone, never allowing them to coordinate effectively. The boxer fell first. A Wing Chun trap redirected his power into the wrestler, sending both men crashing into steel equipment. The Muay Thai fighter lasted longer, his kicks forcing Yen to adapt traditional techniques to modern combat styles. But superior experience and tactical thinking eventually prevailed. The second wave proved more dangerous. 2 MMA veterans approached, with weapons improvised from warehouse equipment, steel pipes, and industrial chains that extended their reach and multiplied their threat level. They attacked with calculated patience, using their weapons to control distance while forcing Yen toward the caged families. The final opponent was Jake Winters, Kellerman's former training partner and a genuinely skilled sadist who enjoyed inflicting pain. He circled like a predator, studying Yen's movements and waiting for exhaustion to create openings. "Getting tired, old man?" Winters taunted, brandishing a crowbar. "These families are going to watch you die before I kill them too." The threat to innocence changed everything. Yen's defensive strategy became aggressively protective, using the warehouse environment more creatively. Overhead cranes became swinging weapons, industrial equipment provided improvised shields, and his decades of choreographing complex fight scenes translated into real-world tactical advantage. When the last fighter fell, Yen began freeing the hostages from their cages. Rosa Martinez sobbed as she held her injured grandson, while other families emerged blinking and traumatized from their imprisonment. But as he opened the final lock, Detective Morrison appeared from the shadows, gun drawn, badge visible, wearing the hollow expression of a man who'd chosen the wrong side one too many times. "I'm sorry," Morrison whispered, his weapon trained, "on the freed families. But it's too late to go back now." Morrison's betrayal hung in the warehouse air like poison gas. His service weapon trembled in his grip as Kozlov descended from his elevated office with armed escorts, the crime bosses. Satisfaction evident in every measured step. "Did you really think the police weren't involved, Mr. Yin?" Morrison's voice cracked with shame and desperation. "This operation exists because we have protection at every level. My gambling debts were just the beginning." The detective's confession, spilled out in broken fragments. Kozlov had evidence of Morrison's corruption, video recordings of money changing hands, financial records of payoffs, documented instances of destroyed evidence and manipulated investigations. Even if tonight's rescue succeeded, Morrison's career and freedom were already forfeit. "My son needed help," Morrison whispered, his gun never wavering despite his obvious distress. "They said if I cooperated, Jake would be safe. Just information. Just looking the other way." It seemed harmless at first. Kozlov revealed the depth of his insurance policy with casual cruelty. Judges, prosecutors, federal agents. The criminal network had compromising material on officials throughout Arizona's justice system. Tonight's witnesses represented the last threat to an operation that had survived because it owned the very people meant to stop it. Even if you escape, Mr. Yen, even if these families testify, the system itself is corrupted. We've spent 5 years building relationships that guarantee our protection. The crime boss's ultimate proposition was theatrically cruel, a death match between Yen and his champion for the entertainment of the trapped spectators. If Yen won, the families would go free, temporarily. If he lost, everyone died anyway. But at least the children wouldn't have to watch their parents executed first. "My champion has been waiting for this opportunity," Kozlov announced as Marcus Kellerman emerged from a side entrance. But this wasn't the arrogant instructor from the dojo. Combat drugs had enhanced his strength to inhuman levels, while improvised armor fashioned from warehouse materials covered his vital areas. The humiliation from their earlier encounter had driven Kellerman beyond rational thought. His eyes showed the dilated pupils and manic focus of pharmaceutical enhancement, and when he moved, it was with jerky, unnatural power that spoke of dangerous chemical augmentation. "I'm going to tear you apart slowly," Kellerman snarled through gritted teeth. "These people are going to watch you beg before I end this." While Kozlov's men set up a fighting ring with theatrical precision, Yin used subtle hand signals to communicate escape instructions to Tommy and Jake Morrison. The boys positioned themselves near the caged families, ready to help when the moment came. As the death match preparation concluded, federal agents finally breached the warehouse perimeter, but Kozlov activated explosive charges that sealed the main entrances, trapping everyone inside the rapidly deteriorating structure. Agent Volkov's voice crackled through damaged communications. "The building is compromised. We can't risk direct assault without killing the hostages." The makeshift fighting ring became an arena of desperation as smoke from Kozlov's explosive charges began filling the warehouse. Kellerman, enhanced by military-grade stimulants and protected by improvised armor, appeared more machine than man in his chemically fueled rage. The death match began with Kellerman's superhuman assault, punches that cracked concrete, kicks that bent steel equipment, grappling attempts that could have crushed normal bones. The combat drugs had given him strength beyond natural limits, while his improvised armor deflected Yen's precision strikes to nerve clusters and pressure points. Traditional Wing Chun proved initially ineffective against an opponent who didn't respond normally to pain or leverage. Kellerman absorbed techniques that should have disabled him, his enhanced physiology allowing him to fight through damage that would cripple ordinary men. Yen realized he needed to abandon pure martial arts. and embraced the improvised combat he'd learned from decades of film choreography. The warehouse became his weapon, swinging chains, industrial equipment, environmental hazards that could multiply force beyond what human muscle could generate. The fight evolved into something between combat and engineering, with Yen using structural elements to compensate for his opponent's pharmaceutical advantages. A crane's lifting mechanism became a catapult. Steam pipes provided scalding distractions. Electrical systems offered shocking opportunities for creative offense as the buildings. Structure began failing from fire damage. Yin used the chaos strategically. A collapsing support beam trapped Kellerman's armored leg, creating the opening needed to deliver precise strikes to unprotected joints and nerve clusters. Even enhanced strength couldn't overcome proper leverage when applied to compromised positions. Kellerman's defeat was hard-won and costly. Yen sustained serious injuries, cracked ribs, torn muscles, deep lacerations from the armor's jagged edges. But victory allowed him to begin leading the hostages toward a service tunnel he'd identified during his initial reconnaissance. However, Morrison and Kozlov refused to accept defeat. The detective opened fire on the fleeing families while the crime boss attempted to detonate additional charges that would bring down the entire building, preferring to kill everyone rather than face exposure and prosecution. "If I can't have my operation, nobody leaves alive to testify about it," Kozlov screamed through the smoke and chaos as structural supports began failing and the group became separated in the maze-like service areas beneath the building. Tommy and Jake Morrison stuck with Yen, while Linda led other families toward what they hoped was an exit. Behind them, Kozlov and his remaining men pursued with deadly determination, knowing that letting anyone escape alive would destroy everything they'd built over 5 years of systematic corruption and violence. The service tunnels beneath the warehouse had become a nightmare maze of smoke, darkness, and industrial hazards. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as Yen, despite his injuries from the death match, led Tommy and Jake Morrison through passages that seemed designed to trap rather than provide escape. The chase became a deadly game of hunter and prey. Yen used his film experience with complex set pieces to create diversions and obstacles, triggering steam releases that obscured vision, causing equipment failures that blocked passages, using his understanding of industrial systems to slow their pursuers while protecting the boys. Tommy and Jake proved surprisingly resourceful, their earlier martial arts lessons translating into practical skills for navigation and stealth. The partnership between former enemies demonstrated how shared danger could forge unexpected alliances. At a central junction, they briefly reunited with Linda's group, the Martinez and Patterson families, all exhausted and terrified but still moving toward potential salvation. The reunion was bittersweet. Rosa Martinez clutched her injured grandson Diego while Beverly Martinez supported Frank Patterson, whose business executive facade had crumbled into raw human vulnerability. But the sound of approaching enemies forced immediate separation. Linda took the larger group toward what appeared to be a maintenance exit, while Yen led the Morrison boys deeper into the tunnel system, deliberately drawing pursuit away from the families most likely to escape. Detective Morrison, following Kozlov's orders, but clearly conflicted, caught up with Yen's group first. In the flickering emergency lighting, father and son faced each other across a chasm of corruption and lost trust. "Dad, please," Jake whispered, his young voice carrying the weight of months of trauma and confusion. Morrison saw his son trapped in the situation his own corruption had helped create. The realization that his choices had endangered Jake rather than protected him shattered his remaining rationalization. In a moment of clarity and desperate paternal love, he made his final choice. The detective turned his weapon on Kozlov's pursuing men, buying precious time for the boys to escape while sacrificing himself in the process. His last words were a whispered apology to Jake. "Be better than your old man." Kozlov, now personally hunting Yen with his last 2 bodyguards, cornered them at what appeared to be a dead end, a massive industrial boiler room with no visible exits. The crime boss was beyond rational thought, driven by fury at seeing his entire operation destroyed by one man's intervention. "You have cost me everything," Kozlov snarled through the smoke. "Now I'll take everything from you." The boiler room contained the building's main gas lines and electrical systems, already damaged by the earlier explosions. One spark could turn the entire space into a bomb that would kill everyone involved, with Tommy and Jake hidden behind industrial equipment. Yin prepared for a final battle where victory might mean death for all. The boiler room filled with the deadly hiss of escaping gas and the violent sparking of damaged electrical systems. Kozlov entered with his two remaining bodyguards, professional killers who had eliminated witnesses across 3 states without hesitation. Tommy and Jake Morrison pressed themselves behind massive industrial equipment while Yin positioned between them and their hunters. Kozlov's revelation was delivered with the calm certainty of a man who had already accepted death. Even if everyone dies tonight, my operation continues through cells in Denver, Las Vegas, and Albuquerque. Phoenix was always expendable. The backup plan was diabolically simple. The warehouse explosion would be blamed on terrorist activity involving a deranged action star whose Hollywood heroics had triggered a gas leak. His wealthy spectators had been evacuated hours ago. Evidence had been sanitized, and the narrative was already being fed to compliant media contacts. You thought you were saving these families, Kozlov taunted through the toxic air. Instead, you've given me the perfect cover story for their elimination. The psychological warfare was expertly calculated to break Yin's resolve before the physical confrontation began. Detailed descriptions of how the other families were already dead, trapped in collapsed sections of the building, designed to destroy hope and fighting spirit. Tommy and Jake listened from hiding as Kozlov described their mother's deaths with clinical precision, but instead of breaking, they saw Yin's determination waver for the first time all night. The legendary fighter who had seemed invincible was still human, still vulnerable to the fear of failing those he'd sworn to protect. The environmental hazards multiplied every danger. Gas leaks that could ignite explosively with any significant spark, live electrical wires sparking in pools of contaminated water, unstable machinery that could crush anyone who ventured too close. Traditional fighting in this environment could kill everyone present. That Kozlov's first bodyguard advanced cautiously, aware of the dangers but confident in superior numbers. Yin caused a controlled electrical short that created a blinding diversion while repositioning, the strobing sparks illuminating the room in nightmarish flashes. The AS combat began around the deadly machinery. A section of ceiling collapsed, blocking the main entrance and trapping everyone inside. The gas leak intensified ominously. "Well, Mr. Yen," Kozlov called through the chaos. "It seems we'll die together after all. But I'm taking those children with me." The collapsed ceiling transformed the boiler room into a concrete tomb, emergency lighting and electrical sparks, providing the only illumination through thickening smoke. The intensifying gas leak created an invisible countdown. Any significant ignition would cause an explosion that would vaporize everyone in seconds. Yin systematically engaged Kozlov's bodyguards using environmental hazards as weapons. The first man fell when Yin redirected his momentum into a steam pipe, the scalding release incapacitating him instantly. The second proved more cautious and skilled, leading to a prolonged fight around unstable machinery where every move risked triggering catastrophe. Tommy and Jake Morrison, inspired by Yin's earlier lessons about protecting others rather than seeking dominance, created their own tactical diversion. Working together despite their different backgrounds, they triggered a controlled steam release that clouded visibility while demonstrating the courage and cooperation their training had been meant to develop. The boys' teamwork showed how much they'd learned about real strength. Not the domination Kellerman had preached, but the mutual support and shared risk that characterized genuine warriors. Their partnership proved that enemies could become allies when they found common purpose. Kozlov's desperation peaked as his protection systematically fell to superior strategy and environmental awareness. He produced a flare gun he'd been carrying, ostensibly for emergency signaling, but now intended as the spark that would ignite the accumulated gas and ensure everyone died together. His laughter echoed through the toxic air as complete madness took hold. "If I can't have my empire, then the great Donnie Yen dies with me. These children will burn as monuments to my power." The second bodyguard's defeat came when Yen used Wing Chun trapping techniques to control the man's weapon while exploiting the unstable environment. A precisely timed combination sent the gunman into electrical panels, the resulting electrocution causing a power failure that plunged the room into near-total darkness that in the sudden blackness, with only the flare gun providing flickering light. Kozlov made his final desperate play. He grabbed Tommy as a human shield, pressing the flare against the boy's temple with shaking hands. "This ends now, Yen," he screamed. "You've destroyed everything I built, so I'm taking what matters most to you." The standoff was lethal. Any wrong move would either trigger the explosive atmosphere or result in Tommy's death. The boy stood perfectly still, remembering Yen's lessons about staying calm under pressure, while Jake Morrison remained hidden, waiting for any opportunity to help his new friend. The darkened boiler room held only the sound of escaping gas and Kozlov's labored breathing. Tommy stood motionless with the flare gun pressed against his skull, demonstrating the calm courage Yen's training had instilled. Jake Morrison remained concealed but ready, their unlikely friendship forged through shared danger and mutual protection. Yen began psychological warfare, using tactics learned from decades of studying human nature. Through film roles, he spoke calmly about the futility of revenge, the possibility of survival through cooperation, and the tragic waste of destroying innocent children to satisfy adult failures. "Your son," Yen said softly, "died in Moscow because someone like you put profit above human life. Will you become the monster that killed him?" Kozlov's personal revelation carried genuine tragedy beneath his criminal madness. His 12-year-old son had been killed in an underground fight 5 years ago, leading him to America, where he built this operation as both revenge against a world that had failed his family and a practical method for accumulating power through others' suffering. "They promised me my boy would be safe," Kozlov whispered, his grip trembling on both Tommy and the weapon. "One fight, easy money, no real danger. I found him dying in a concrete basement while rich men counted their winnings." The emotional foundation made him more dangerous because his actions had psychological justification. This wasn't simple greed or sadism. It was a father's grief twisted into systematic violence against other people's children. Tommy demonstrated remarkable courage. Using breathing techniques, Yen had taught him to remain calm while slowly shifting his weight. His preparation to drop and roll, if given the signal, showed how much confidence he'd gained from proper mentorship. And genuine care, Yen's final technique was a masterpiece of precision and timing. Using Wing Chun's principle of simultaneous attack and defense, he struck Kozlov's wrist to disable the flare gun while pulling Tommy to safety in one fluid motion. The move required perfect calculation. Any error would trigger the weapon or fail to save the boy. Kozlov, disarmed and desperate, lunged for a sparking electrical wire, intending to manually ignite the gas that would kill them all. Yen intercepted him, and in their struggle, Kozlov accidentally triggered the explosion he'd been threatening. However, Yen's intervention directed the blast toward a reinforced section of wall rather than the gas-filled center of the room. The explosion created a new exit but also destabilized the entire building structure. As debris rained down, and the building began its final collapse. Yen grabbed both boys and led them through the hole into another section of the underground complex. Behind them, Kozlov lay motionless among the rubble, finally paying for his crimes. But ahead lay uncertain escape through a building destroying itself around them. The explosion had opened a passage to the warehouse's basement level, but also accelerated the building's structural collapse. Yen, Tommy, and Jake Morrison discovered Linda and the other rescued families trapped by debris and rising water from broken pipes, their relief at reunion tempered by immediate new dangers. Linda had kept the Martinez and Patterson families organized and calm during their ordeal, demonstrating leadership growth that paralleled Tommy's courage development. Rosa Martinez clutched her injured grandson Diego while Beverly Martinez supported Frank Patterson, whose executive composure had been stripped away to reveal fundamental human decency. The basement flooded rapidly as water pressure built behind accumulated debris. Traditional exits were blocked by collapsed support beams, and the rising water level threatened to drown them all within minutes. Engineering rather than martial arts would determine their survival. Yen drew on film experience with complex practical effects and set construction, identifying a way to use the flooding water's pressure to clear an escape route. The plan required precise timing and coordination from everyone. If executed incorrectly, the rushing water could drown them all instead of freeing them. During the preparation, families shared brief but meaningful conversations that resolved character arcs. Linda told Tommy how proud she was of his transformation from frightened victim to courageous protector. Jake Morrison apologized to Diego for months of bullying, their shared trauma creating understanding between former enemies. Beverly Martinez thanked Yen for saving her family, while Frank Patterson admitted he'd learned more about genuine strength in one night than in years of trying to project toughness through aggression and dominance. The engineering solution involved using debris as a makeshift dam to increase water pressure, then releasing it suddenly to blast through a weakened foundation wall. Success would create access to Phoenix's storm drain system, but failure meant drowning in a concrete tomb. Yen's plan worked, creating a tunnel that led to rushing storm water beneath the city. However, as families began evacuating through the flooded passage, voices and flashlight beams indicated that Kozlov's remaining men had survived and were pursuing through the drainage system. The criminals were determined to eliminate all witnesses regardless of their boss's death. Understanding that letting anyone escape alive would expose the entire multi-state operation and destroy their own futures, the last family member entered the storm drain. Yen realized he needed to stay behind to collapse the entrance and prevent pursuit. Linda refused to abandon him, creating a moment of emotional connection between two people who had found strength through protecting others. Tommy grabbed Yen's hand with determination that surprised everyone. "Heroes don't get left behind," he said firmly, giving Yen the motivation to find a solution that would save everyone, including himself. The storm drain system beneath Phoenix became their underground river to freedom, rushing water from broken pipes and desert rains, creating a treacherous but navigable escape route. Yen led the exhausted families through waist-deep currents while flashlight beams behind them indicated relentless pursuit by Kozlov's surviving men. The chase tested endurance and teamwork. Tommy and Jake Morrison helped elderly Beverly Martinez navigate difficult passages, while Linda supported Rosa Martinez and her injured son Diego. Frank Patterson, his business executive facade completely abandoned, carried supplies and assisted anyone who struggled. Kozlov's men attempted to trap them using explosives to collapse tunnel entrances, but Yen had anticipated this tactic. He'd been leading them toward a specific junction where multiple drain lines converged, providing several escape options and preventing the bottleneck strategy. When gunmen caught up at the junction, Yen fought in chest-deep water while protecting civilians. Wing Chun techniques adapted for aquatic combat, using water resistance and current flow to enhance his movements while his opponents struggled against unstable footing. Jake Morrison proved his complete transformation by leading families to safety while Yen handled the final confrontation. His actions honored his father's sacrifice and showed that corruption's legacy could be broken through courage and proper choices. Yen defeated the last pursuers using environmental advantage. Rushing water and unstable footing favored his balanced, flowing style over their aggressive, forceful approach. The victory was complete but costly. As dawn broke over Phoenix, they emerged from the storm system where federal agents and emergency responders waited. Having tracked their progress through the drainage network, dawn's first light revealed the scope of their ordeal as emergency medical teams treated injuries while federal agents documented evidence. The warehouse still burned in the distance, consuming all remaining traces of Kozlov's operation in flames that would rage for hours. Agent Volkov briefed them on broader implications. Evidence Yen had recorded, combined with financial records seized during coordinated raids, exposed criminal networks across 3 states. However, Kozlov's corruption claims proved accurate. Several police officers and a federal judge faced arrest as investigations expanded. Diego Martinez required extensive medical treatment for underground fighting injuries, while other rescued children began the long process of psychological recovery. Federal victim compensation funds and counseling services were arranged, though healing would take years rather than months. Kellerman, critically injured but alive, cooperated fully with investigators to avoid life imprisonment. His testimony revealed locations of other operations, leading to coordinated raids that rescued dozens of additional families and fighters. His fall from respected instructor to federal prisoner became a cautionary tale about authority without moral foundation. Media attention focused on Yen's heroism, but he consistently deflected credit to the family's courage and law enforcement officers who risked their lives. His humility reinforced his heroic stature while keeping attention on systemic problems rather than individual celebrity. The martial arts community rallied to support affected families. Legitimate schools offered free training in positive environments, while funds were established to help families recover from predatory contracts and financial exploitation. AS immediate crisis management concluded. Linda approached Yen privately. She wanted to thank him not just for saving their lives, but for showing Tommy what genuine strength and character looked like. Protection rather than domination, wisdom rather than mere PowerPoint. 2 weeks later, the community center buzzed with activity as Yen's temporary martial arts program helped children rebuild their relationship with training in a supportive, transparent environment. Donated space and volunteer instructors created something beautiful from the ashes of exploitation. Tommy demonstrated forms with remarkable improvement, his transformation from frightened victim to confident young martial artist illustrating the story's central theme about finding inner strength through proper guidance and genuine care rather than abuse and manipulation. The affected families had formed a support network, helping each other navigate legal proceedings and emotional recovery. Rosa Martinez and Linda Brennan developed close friendship, their different experiences creating mutual understanding and assistance. Jake Morrison channeled grief and guilt into leadership among younger students. His partnership with Tommy showed how former enemies could become allies through shared values and common purpose. His character development honored his father's final sacrifice while proving redemption was possible through teaching Yen shared deeper principles that had guided him through crisis. Martial arts as protection rather than domination, community importance over individual achievement, and the concept that true victory meant everyone becoming stronger rather than some being defeated. Legal news brought closure as federal investigations resulted in indictments nationwide. Evidence from their ordeal proved crucial in dismantling similar operations, with Kellerman's cooperation helping other victims find justice and freedom. Linda and Yen's relationship evolved into mutual respect and friendship based on shared values, rather than dependency or drama. Both focused on healing and rebuilding rather than romance. Though deeper connection remained possible as training concluded, Tommy asked the question that led to their story's resolution. Master Yen, will you stay in Phoenix? We still have so much to learn. His words represented the community's recognition that healing required ongoing commitment rather than simple rescue. 6 months later, the Phoenix Community Martial Arts Center's grand opening symbolized transformation, a renovated warehouse replacing exploitation with empowerment. Funded through federal programs, community donations, and Yen's entertainment industry connections, the ceremony featured demonstrations from all age groups, showing how the program had grown beyond crisis survivors to serve the broader community. Tommy performed a solo form demonstrating mastery of both technique and philosophy, earning applause from family and friends who remembered his frightened beginning. Institutional changes prevented future exploitation. The center operated under strict transparency guidelines with active parental governance, simple contracts, and financial assistance for families in need. The model was being replicated in cities affected by similar crimes. Character resolutions provided satisfying conclusions. Linda used federal reward money to start a catering business employing other single mothers. Rosa Martinez worked as office manager, providing family stability while staying connected to their supportive community. Frank Patterson served on the board of directors, using business experience constructively. Jake Morrison, now 15, served as junior instructor while continuing his own development. His transformation from bully to mentor demonstrated the program's success in building character alongside physical skills. Diego Martinez had recovered from injuries and found purpose teaching adaptive martial arts to children with disabilities. Yen announced permanent Phoenix residency, committing to the center and community long-term. His decision represented true heroism, staying to build lasting solutions rather than simply solving immediate problems. His film career continued, but now included projects highlighting social issues and positive role models. The final scene showed Tommy, now 13 and visibly confident, teaching nervous beginners. When a shy girl struggled with her first form, he offered gentle encouragement using Yen's words. Remember, root first, then grow. As sunset painted the center in golden light, activity continued. Children learning, parents supporting, instructors teaching, former victims now advocating for others. The motto painted on the wall captured their journey. Strength through service, victory through virtue. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.